So our next and last subtitle is the assassination of Lincoln. So before Lincoln can even put his Reconstruction plan in place and start to implement parts of it, he's assassinated. This occurs on April 14th, 1865. In fact, it occurs only 5 days after Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. And as we all probably know, Lincoln was assassinated by none other than John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth was an actor. He was from Maryland, and he was a white supremacist and a pro-slavery Confederate sympathizer, even though Maryland itself did not officially secede from the Union. But remember that Maryland did have slaves. So he was the leader of a group of conspirators who were planning to overthrow the government. Now, that night that he assassinated Lincoln, he was not planning only to assassinate the president, but he was planning with conspirators to assassinate the president, the vice president, Andrew Johnson, and the Secretary of State, William Seward. Fortunately, not fortunately, but they only succeeded in assassinating the president, not the vice president and the Secretary of State, which would have thrown the government into utter chaos. And his goal in doing so was to save the Confederacy. He hoped that if Lincoln was taken out of the picture, the North would kind of be weaker and the South could continue fighting. So on April 14th, 1865, Lincoln went to Ford's Theater, which was located in D.C., to watch a play with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. Booth had performed at this theater previously, and so he was very familiar with its layout. And he snuck into the Lincoln's box with a pistol in one hand and a dagger in the other. And from only 6 inches away, he shot Lincoln in the head before leaping from the box and down onto the stage, startling the crowd that had also heard the gunshot. When he landed, he actually broke his leg. Nevertheless, he yelled, "Sic semper tyrannis," meaning, "thus always to tyrants." Or maybe, this is by different reports, he could have yelled, "The South is avenged." Either way, he yelled something about tyranny or something about avenging the South, and he limped out of the theater, remember his leg is broken, and escaped on horseback. Lincoln was horribly wounded and was carried to a nearby boarding house where he died the next morning at 7:21 a.m. The Secretary of War, who had rushed to his side and was present when Lincoln died, said now he belongs to the ages, meaning he's kind of moved on into his legacy. After this event, 10,000 federal officers hunted for John Wilkes Booth to bring him to justice, and he was eventually cornered outside a Virginia farmhouse with an accomplice. The accomplice immediately turned himself in to the officers. He and 7 others were later tried for their role in the assassination, and 4 of them were hanged. Booth, however, refused to give himself up, and the officers eventually had to set the barn in which he was hiding on fire. While he moved around inside the barn, one of the officers shot him, claiming that he saw him raise his gun to fire at them. However, his commanding officer, of the officer that shot him, denied this, saying that he shot without cause and disobeyed their orders to take Booth alive. The shot hit him in the neck and partially severed his spinal cord, which paralyzed him. So he was dragged out of the barn and onto the porch of the house, paralyzed. But he could still talk at this time. And he asked that his hands would be raised in front of his face so he could see them. And he muttered, "Useless, useless." This is probably in reference to the knowledge that he'd gained pretty recently, that the last Confederate army in the East had surrendered and his attempt to save the Confederacy had failed. So his very last words were, "Tell my mother I died for my country." So, tomorrow we'll be having live classes. Don't forget about that. Bring "Oh Captain, My Captain" along with you.